I was actually here last year talking about my obsessions, which actually turned out to be OCD. And I'm going to be honest with you, because my OCD is very much my internal monologue, I was like, should I just tell the same story? Will they notice? I don't know. But don't worry, I came up with something brand new just for you guys today. So thank you for being here. But yeah, I wanted to start out by asking, maybe you guys don't know this, I didn't know this until very recently, but did you know that only 30 to 50% of the population has an internal monologue? Like, did you know that there are people out there who, when they sit in silence, are actually sitting in real, complete silence? That just blew my mind, because my brain oscillates wildly between repeating TikTok sounds that I find funny and intrusive, violent thoughts. That's it, you know? So it just keeps going back and forth. So it's just wild to me that there are people who don't have that, especially because me and my internal monologue go way, way back. So as a child, I'm sure you're all aware that some children have imaginary friends. They talk to them, they play with them, they blame things on them. You know, it's regular, it's stuff, but I did not have an imaginary friend. No, I was too smart. You know, I was like, it's a figment of your imagination. That's not real. So I decided I was gonna talk to something real. And that real thing was my reflection. I would talk to window me on long road trips when we'd go out for family vacations. I would talk to mirror me whenever I caught my reflection anywhere. And we would have heated conversations, you know. We would discuss who the hottest Backstreet Boy was, or my reflection me, she would ask questions. She'd interview me as if I was a celebrity. She's like, what are you wearing today? So, you know, we had some good times, reflection, me and I. Really great times. But then I kind of stopped talking to reflection me out loud, you know. And it was around the time that I had actual friends to talk to, and I had a younger brother to annoy, so I stopped talking to her out loud. But that didn't mean that the voice was gone. It didn't mean that my mind was silent. No, because actually, after a very unfortunate event, my great-grandmother having a heart attack in my house, and me witnessing that and her passing away, after that, a new voice showed up. And this voice worried a lot. It was so concerned about my health. It was so concerned about everybody else's health. And weirdly enough, it sounded a lot like my mom. And this voice, she was relentless. She would tell me, take your temperature. What if you have a fever? Take your pulse. What if your heart's not beating right? Wake up in the middle of the night, go to your brother's room, stand there creepily staring to make sure that he is still breathing in his sleep, because he might not be. So, you know, it made me do crazy things, but I listened because, well, it sounded like my mom. And her and I, we had some good times just worrying about where death was lurking, you know? And then I thought, this is really exhausting. I'm thinking about death all the time. Third grade shouldn't be this hard. I have my Oscar speech to prepare. But that was only the beginning of this internal monologue crisis, because my internal monologue was about to get much more crowded and much, much meaner. You see, I began to hear a voice that wasn't arguing who the hottest boy was anymore, because this voice was telling me, the boy wouldn't like you anyway. So why are you thinking about that? This voice kept telling me about all the things that were wrong with me. It kept telling me how my legs were too long, or my lips were too small, or my voice was annoying, or I just wasn't funny. I was just so annoying. And that voice sounded like my dad. So I was like, okay, well, there's my mom and my dad, and they're both talking to me all the time. Cool. But this voice, it was just mean. It was just listing all the ways that I wasn't enough. It was listing all the ways that I was unlovable. And reflection me, she was still there, she was still around, and she would try to pop up every now and then and argue with this bully voice. And yeah, she found out that she couldn't really. She learned her place. She only came out whenever it was time to imagine conversations with my crush or for my Broadway shower performances. But other than that, you know, she stayed in her own corner. Now, this bully and the anxious voice, oof, power couple. The two thrived together, you know, because it was convinced I was dying, but it reminded me that I deserved it. So, you know, it was like, things are all gonna go wrong and it's all your fault. And I was like, okay, yes, you're right. And for a while, I learned that these inner voices were not going to shut up unless I found out that an outer voice telling me things, nice things I like to hear, helped. It helped me forget my inner voices. And so for a while, the outer voices were my parents and my teachers. I was a straight A student. I did everything well. I was a goody two-shoes, a teacher's pet, if you must. But I was doing everything right. I was getting that outer validation. But that didn't matter because bully voice was like, you fucking bore. You're boring. That's dumb. And so I was like, fine. I'll find a different outer voice that will get that validation that I need. That outer voice became boys. And if anybody here has ever dated a boy, you know that validation doesn't last very long. Whether it's your brain believing it or they just are awful, it didn't last long. And so, if anything, it gave my power couple more material, you know, because now it was like, you're ugly, you're gonna die alone. And I was like, yep, yeah, I am. And eventually, you know, I kept asking for reassurance. I kept picking fights to see if my boyfriends would fight for me. And then eventually my bully was just flat out telling me people were actively conspiring against me. I've never actually seen She's All That, but I was convinced that I was that main character. I was convinced that it was all a bet and that my boyfriend of 3 years was gonna drop the shoe any moment now. It's all been a prank. You've been like punked, done. And so I started just being really out there, you know, like, hey, do you still love me? Hey, why did you answer the phone like that? Hey, you said love you, not I love you, so does that mean that you don't love me anymore? And of course, any sane person is like, this is a lot, calm down. And eventually the anxiety and the bully would seep into every relationship, check after check after check, and it would just confirm what my bully had been telling me all along. I am unlovable and everybody's going to leave you. And my anxiety was like, it's all your fault too. Until one day, my bully went too far. One day, I remember coming home and crying. I was just having, you know, my regular weekly cry. And I sat there looking at my puffy face in the mirror, and my anxiety was like, you're going to die all alone. And my bully was like, then kill yourself, might as well. And I was like, oh, that is a really good argument, might as well. Sure. And to this day, I am so thankful for my OCD's consistency and its relentless fear of death, because that's probably the only reason I'm still here. Because I didn't know, and I didn't want to know, what dying actually felt like. And so I did not kill myself. And if you're saying, yes, this is a happy ending, hold your breath, because that doesn't mean that the OCD, the anxiety didn't compromise. It was like, we don't want to kill ourselves, but what if you just really hurt yourself? What if you punish yourself for being you? And so started a long episode of just self-harm. Whether I was scratching my arms raw, giving myself black eyes, I was just bent on, I have to hurt myself. And I found out that boys and straight A's be damned, this was the best solution I had to shut up the voices. Because if I was in enough pain, I completely forgot about the voices and I just thought about the pain. And that went on for a really long time, up until my early 20s. And I'm not gonna say that it was the healthiest solution, because it was not. And finally enough, outer voices were like, have you tried therapy? So I did try therapy. And if you thought that was gonna be the happy ending, it wasn't. Because yes, therapy has been amazing. And I recommend it to everyone. Medication if you need it, chef's kiss. But it wasn't everything. I was in therapy and I stopped self-harming, but the voices were still there. And then, guess what happened, you guys? A global pandemic. And if I wasn't already alone with those voices in my head enough, I started out 2020 going through a breakup and super alone. First time in my adult life living by myself, and now I had no contact with the outside world. So I got to know my inner self very, very well, and I still kept going to therapy, Zoom therapy. And that's when I found out that, there is a way that I can shut up these voices. And I learned through therapy that when they say trust your gut, they don't mean me. No, I cannot trust it. But I've also learned that those things weren't me. All this time I thought, oh, I'm telling myself to kill myself, so I should, or like I'm thinking these really horrible, violent thoughts. I must want to do these things. And no, they're all separate things. It's OCD, it's, anxiety, it's self-hate. It's not me. So you'll be happy to know that I did reconnect with Reflection Me during pandemic. We had a lot of great times. We talked a lot about what we would do once the apocalypse was over. And the one thing that I learned that I really, really appreciate, and I think it sounds really dumb, and people are like, scoff. But it was just talking nicely to myself. Talking nicely to Reflection Me and having Reflection Me talk nicely to me. And so while, the bully is still there, it still thinks my legs are too long, and my anxiety is still there. It still thinks that one of these days I will get meningitis. I am able to be like, hey, it's okay, it's all good, because Reflection Me and I have a morning routine where I stand in front of the mirror and I'm like, your legs are perfectly proportional to your body, and it's okay. So what I have learned, and what I hope that you have learned tonight, is that your inner monologue, it is chaotic if you have one, and if you don't, what? Like, tell me more. Just please. Thank you guys, and have a happy New Year.